Okay, welcome everybody. Spiritual Psychotherapy episode 6. We're nearing the end of the semester, but hopefully it should be a worthwhile one. So this time I decided, before we continue, of course, with our Kabbalistic stuff, which we will indeed get to, I want to start off with some excerpts of the lecture from Alan Watts talking about the Taoist way. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I've found in my own life that this lecture does a unique job in putting me in a mental space that most of the time I'm not in. And it's something that I want to cultivate in my own life. And as always, I want to give that back to whoever's listening, and whether that's on Spotify later on or, of course, right now with you guys. I want to be able to cultivate this kind of a frame of mind before we delve into anything else. And I think the way that Alan Watts is with words, he has such an amazing way of describing things and allowing you almost to ride the coattails of his words into whatever experiencing he was having. Baruch haba. No, it's on here. Don't worry. Sit anywhere. Fadal. Just in time to hear these brilliant words. Okay, so listen up and let me know if you have any questions. We'll try to break it down. But of course, there's something still better than that. He was just talking about how to kind of trick yourself into maintaining a good habit or, getting off of a bad habit like quitting drinking. He's saying, and that is not to let the devil know anything. And that means, of course, not to let yourself know. One of the many meanings of that saying, let not your left hand know what your right hand doeth. It is just this, right? So he's saying there's a certain way of acting without acting. This is something we've hinted at many times, that this Eastern meditative way of being and acting is such that it's an effortless effort. And you might say, what does this mean? And it's something, hey, Baruch haba Idi. It's something that you wouldn't understand what it means unless it's something that you're kind of slipping into. How do you act without acting and without effort? Yeah. So this is from Alan Watts. He's an Eastern philosophical minded guy who was raised in the West, but studied a lot of Eastern philosophy and brought it to the West. So he's a Western guy. And that was why in the Zen discipline, the great deal of it centers around acting without premeditation. I love this because we all know that state of flow or that state of fun when we're playing a sport and we feel that way. As those of you know who read Herrigel's book, Zen and the Art of Archery, it was necessary to release the bowstring without first saying, now. There's a certain way of acting, he's saying, where you're not constantly planning the next thing. You're just acting naturally without self-consciousness. This is a flow state. This is a state that is enlightenment in a way, kind of enlightenment in a bottle. There's a wonderful story you may have also read by a German writer, von Kleist. This is one of my favorites, about a boxing match with a bear. The man can never defeat this bear because the bear always knows his plans in advance and is ready to deal with any situation. The only way to get through to the bear would be to hit the bear without having first intended to do so. So this guy's fighting a bear. Of course, what is this almost like a mashal of? Almost like the fight that we're having with our own ego. The feeling that our ego has with itself of, I must overcome myself. Trying to raise yourself up by your own bootstraps, which, as we said, is the equivalent of trying to take off in an airplane by pulling up on your seat. That's not going to make you take off any more quickly. So basically, he's saying you have to hit the bear without first intending to do so, because intending to do so already alerts the bear that you're about to try to hurt him or try to overcome him. That would catch him, he says. And so this is one of the great problems in the spiritual life, or whatever you want to call it, is to be able to have intention and act simultaneously. By this means you escape karma and you escape the devil. He's using specific language that religious people might understand. But the point is still there, that there's a way of acting where you don't have to announce it to yourself. It's just acting. And like we said last week, the student comes up to his guru. He says, what is the fundamental principle of this Buddhism? And he says, did you eat breakfast this morning? He says, yes. He says, did you wash your bowls? He says, no, I didn't wash my bowls. And then he says, so go wash your bowls. And it's as simple as that. It's just acting without thinking about a million things in the process. Continuing on. But of course, there's something still better than that. And that is not to let the devil know anything. Oh, sorry, we read that already. Okay, I put that twice. So you might say that the Taoist is exemplary in this respect, that this is getting free from karma without making any previous announcement. Of simply, supposing we have a train and we want to unload the train of its freight cars. You can go to the back end and you can unload them one by one and shunt them into the siding. But the simplest of all ways of unloading is to uncouple between the engine and the first car. And that gets rid of the whole bunch at once. It's one of my favorite analogies that I've ever read with regards to overcoming karma, quote unquote. We're stuck as human beings in time. Of course, we're stuck in time. But as my rabbi kind of told me the last time I was in Israel with him, we had a very deep discussion about beliefs. And he told me something pretty profound. He said, time itself is a belief. In any given moment, we have the ability to stop believing in time. Right now, you have the ability to simply uncouple this moment from all other moments. And instead of having to use some type of righteousness or some type of morality to earn this, which of course you see where I'm going, that's ego, trying to earn it, to finally be worthy of it. That's all ego, which is not to put down the ego, but it's telling you that's not the direction that's going to let you overcome the ego, seemingly. Instead, use intelligence, use a skill. It's the same reason I named this class Spiritual Psychotherapy and Spiritual Ophthalmology, because I'm trying to move away from a moralistic way of speaking. Because what value is it if I sit you down every Tuesday night and say, be a better person? Then, we have so many complications with that because so many of the world's evils have been done in the name of trying to make the world a better place. Basically, almost all of the evils, almost all. Some people are that malicious that they do it intentionally, but that's only, hopefully, not as much. But the point is, to be able to uncouple this moment from other moments is a very unique skill. He says, and it is in that sort of way you see that the Taoist gets rid of karma without challenging it. And so it has the reputation you see of being the easy way. One of my favorite things. What this means is, this is not some magical cure for the rest of time and you're going to live happily ever after. It's simply saying, whenever you remember to do so, uncouple this moment from other moments. Do it immediately. Do it without thinking. Do it with like the guy releasing the bowstring without first saying now.
At which particular moment? No,
this one.
When you're doing what?
Whenever.
That's
the point. Is it doesn't have to be any particular time.
But we're always thinking ahead, thinking what we're going to have with the results, trying to think of the results before we do something.
Yeah.
In order to make sure the result is good.
Yeah, we are always doing that.
Just things now, okay.
No. I think what he's saying is you can think ahead, by all means, but when you're doing the first thing, just do that. Don't worry about anything else. Just do that.
And part of it is kind of, it is a leap of faith. It's a leap of faith into saying that I don't have full control over the outcome of this, and yet I'm still just acting.
Get married and then worry about it later.
Yeah, so I hear your point, and I think it doesn't mean to act rashly, but it means that whatever you're doing, try to do it without caring too much about the consequences of it. And that doesn't mean that you should go and, burn down the world and justify tremendous acts of evil that you're doing knowingly because you're just saying, oh, well, I was acting without thinking, or I was acting because I know that I'm a part of God and God can do no wrong and my will is God's will. That's a psychotic way of thinking. But if you're able to perfect this as an art, you don't have to do it with tremendous decisions. Start off slow. Start off with little things. Start off with the way I'm painting, when I'm playing sports, things that are not going to make or break me like tremendous life decisions. But that's a very good point.
So,
Any other questions? Yeah,
just a comment.
please.
When I was taking jujitsu a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
there's a point where when you're rolling, when you're grappling with your opponent, where you have like, you can go be in a flow state, where you and him are both not trying to kill each other, but you're working, you're doing different moves, but you're not even thinking, you're just going into different things.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So you're not worrying about the outcome of doing this choke or doing this thing. You're just going for it.
It's amazing. I've been doing the jujitsu stuff also. I've been, a couple nights a week, maybe 2, 3, and it's along with kickboxing, it allows me to do it in a physical way what I'm always trying to do through just mentally through meditation. And when someone's punching you in the face, it kind of forces you not to think. That's the beauty of it, is it brings you to the present moment where it's not, oh, let me move out of the way. It's my mind didn't even play anything into this. It's just my body acted without thinking. It's instinct. So we have the famous story in the beginning of Jonathan Haidt's book. He quotes that he was riding on horseback, and he was riding on a cliff edge, maybe in some foreign country, I think. And all of a sudden, the horse is galloping, and he sees that if the horse keeps galloping this way, he's going to fall off the cliff. And he's about to, start going crazy and pulling himself in one direction. Before he could even do that, the horse immediately steps to the left and just continues on its way around the mountain. And he compares this to the human brain, where you have the rider and the horse. The cerebral cortex is like the self-consciousness that we have, or the ego that we have. And the reptilian brain is like the horse. It's like this instinctual part of ourselves that's already acting without thinking, without premeditating everything. And Alan Watts has often said that the human brain is an organ like any other, where maybe we could utilize this organ the same way we utilize others. And then we could notice when it's going, above its pay grade and acting too much, because most of the time we don't need to be analyzing everything. We just need to be with what is. Okay, great. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Please.
I wanted to ask, is this the id in psychology or
Psychiatry, psychology, yeah.
Yeah, because just this past Shabbos, I was at a friend's house. She has a few children, and she has a 2.5-year-old who I saw the id. The girl took off her clothes,
Yeah.
ate from everybody's food, and just was running around doing whatever. So isn't that the just going by instinct and doing without thinking, perhaps?
In a lot of ways it can be, but I think in a lot of ways that's not just, it is a lot of id, but I think there's a balance that can be struck when you're an adult practicing this. I don't have the answers. You're right. For somebody that could be mentally ill, or definitely a child, children are going to do as they do. But I could say the same thing about the parent. The way they responded is also part of the Tao. It's also part of just their natural instinct, which is to tell the kid, we have certain ways of living and certain ways of balancing and respecting. But I think you're right. There is an element of id to this that should be embraced, but you don't have to take it too far. That's what I would say. Yeah, Mickey.
So it sounds like somewhat contradictory. So I don't know what you think about this, but it's emphasizing almost thoughtless. Don't think about it. Just do it. Do it. Do it instinctually almost.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also a big emphasis on intention, right? Be mindful. Do it the way it was meant to be done, let's say. But in a way, those are two opposites.
Yeah. It's hard to sometimes balance that mindfulness and that intentionality, which is a thought, with the thoughtlessness. But I think the beauty is, yes, they can both coexist in a certain way. And it's
let me volunteer something.
Sure, yeah,
maybe
please. I would love to hear that.
But I think I think people are taking it like literally, and not like in practice. When it comes time to make a decision, then you make a decision, right? I mean, I don't know, whatever decision you might have. What do I take this route to work? Do I take that route to work? Should I put on I don't know, green pants or blue pants? You want to make a decision, make a decision. But the point is, when you're not making a decision, when you're doing something, then just do that. And then don't think about, like our minds just tend to get polluted with thoughts that take us out of the present moment. So you can't be. I mean, I guess maybe you could somehow generalize it to include every moment, but I don't. To me at least, that's not practical. But if you are going for a walk, then you can clearly enjoy the walk and just think I'm walking and I'm appreciating and and you're in the moment, right? That's the way I could do it easily, is do something that doesn't require thinking. Like walking doesn't require thinking. Even operating, if I'm operating, I'm in the zone, right? So I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing tonight or whatever. So certain activities are conducive to this type of behavior, but not everything.
Absolutely. And I think sports is a great example as well, because if you are thinking about every shot and you're overthinking, you're probably going to hit it into the net, when you're playing tennis. But if you're just acting on instinct, you're going to be much smarter of a player, in my experience, just personally. But when it comes to something like meditation, I don't think there's a problem in the first second of the meditation to set an intention, but you're not going to continuously think about that intention. Even though it might come back, in the thoughts, that's fine. But ultimately, if the intention is to be intentionless, which is kind of like the purest form in a way of just letting the mind be. And like they say, the best way to quiet stormy waters is not to hit them with some kind of device, but rather just to allow them to be. So the intention you could be is, let me be mindful. And the irony of that is, let me not think about thinking, and let me just allow the thoughts to come and go like the waves in the ocean. And it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, I see where the paradox is and where the contradictions could come in. So notice those and let those go too. That's what I would say. Great points all around. Oh, ID, sorry, you're muted. Yes. Oh, ID, I think you're still muted. Let me see. There you go. Now I hear you.
You hear me now?
Yes.
So I just wanted to bring up, just on a personal experience, like I've always looked at it like when I was a kid, I excelled at algebra, but I think I excelled because once I learned the so I'd say the formula, it was just an exercise for me.
Mhm.
And I think that, like, I compare it to Michael Jordan, that every time he shot, he knows how to shoot. It was just an exercise for him.
Yes.
So a lot of times you learn things in life, it's just applying what you learn. You don't have to learn it again. You don't have to keep learning it and learning it. Once you learn the formula or the recipe or the drill, then it becomes like an exercise. That's just my own take. It's always worked for me that way. That once I learn something, then I could take off with it. But on the other point, I wanted to ask you: is there like a negative connotation to the id, that that person? Because once years ago, because I'm ID, whatever. Once I had a business thing, and the guy said to me, "Are you the id?" And this was 20 years. I didn't know what he was talking about. But it came off like, is it like narcissist or what? Like, is there a plus or minus to the id?
Yeah,
What?
It's an amazing question. I'll tell you what Alan Watts actually says. This guy says basically that there's a way that people, like these scholarly people or even the psychologists, will put down the id, or they'll put down the idea of libido, which they term as blind, lustful, sensual energy. But the point is, you realize that those are just judgments, and those are unnecessary judgments. And like the Torah says, that Hashem created us, that we should love Hashem bechol lebabecha. And why do we say that in Shema? You should love God with all your heart, but it repeats the bet, lebabecha. I could have just said libecha. Why lebabecha? With your yetzer hatov and your yetzer hara. And they give a story in the Gemara where the rabbis prayed that there should be no more evil inclination, no more yetzer hara, and the chicken stopped laying eggs, and nobody went to work, and nobody was using that libido in the entire universe, and the world was going to smithereens, and the rabbis prayed that it should come back. And the point being, it's like one of those funny kid stories, but the point is that it's a very deep message, that we shouldn't be quashing this primal id libido energy, but maybe we should be channeling it in a certain way. And that doesn't mean to try to fit any, square pegs into any round holes. It just means to channel it in its natural way. And the funny thing about the Tao is that the question could be, how do you stay in line with the Tao? And then the answer that the guru will give is trying to stay in line with the Tao is deviating from the Tao. The only thing you can do to deviate from the Tao is by trying to. And even that is not deviating from the Tao because everything is the Tao. So the point is, just act naturally and trust that through that natural way of acting, good things will come out of it. And even if they don't, just allow yourself to know that these things are temporary. Yeah. So I think that's, and what you were saying earlier about, being a student, I've found that the tools that I learned even from elementary school and just people skills and things like that, that's carried me through every stage of life more than anything else. The tools that we really need come at a very critical period in childhood, and they kind of shape the rest of our lives. And you see the results in people who didn't get those tools in childhood and struggle for many years and have to find a way to develop those. But
It's interesting. Another thing, just another tidbit that years ago that I read it somewhere, but it gave me a flashback to my child. Math was always my key. I excelled at math, but when I looked at it, it said that the teacher that has the most impact in your education is probably the career path or the skill set that will dominate you, and that's what happened to me. I had the best math teacher for 3 years, and he made me like I was a rocket ship. But that skill set stayed with me. So
and
maybe
I had the best biology teacher. It's the same story.
Oh, really? Wow, that's interesting.
Great, and that's when I wanted to be a doctor.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah,
I love it. Thank you, Idea. These are great points all around. You guys are awesome.
So it's good if I'm the id. I'm okay.
Yeah, listen. Tell them I'm the id 2.0.
I don't want to change my initials. That's I
Definitely
got
don't.
a brand.
Idea, you're one of a kind. We never want you to change. I love it.
I'm gonna go with Sting says in The Englishman in New York. Be yourself, no matter what they say.
Amen. I love that. Idea, the best. Let's see what Alan Watts says. There are all kinds of yogas and ways for people who want to be difficult. And one of the great gambits of a man like Gurdjieff was to make it all seem as difficult as possible, because that challenged the vanity of his students. So what does this remind me of? This reminds me of all those meditative gurus and teachers who told you, it's enlightenment. Oh, it's going to be really tough. It's going to be very difficult. You're going to have to overcome years. You're going to have to go on these silent retreats. You're going to have to spend 30 years figuring this out. And you're going to have to do all this crazy stuff. And some people even, they drink water in through their anus and they do crazy things. Who knows, these crazy practices that went on for centuries, asceticism and all these things just to try to achieve this. But at the end of the day, it's really as simple as ABC 1, 2, 3. As just coming back to right now. It's as simple as that. And if you're able to overcome the need of your ego to feel like it did this tremendously amazing accomplishment, if you could let go of that need, maybe you won't have to drive yourself to do all these extreme things. If some teacher, some guru says, really, this isn't difficult at all, it's perfectly easy, some people will say, oh, he's not really the real thing. We want something tough and difficult. That's just how we are as humans, right? When we see somebody starts out giving you a discipline that's very, very weird and rigid, people think, now there is a thing, right? People get excited when you tell them something is really difficult. That man means business, we think, right? See? And so they flatter themselves by going to such a guy, and they're serious students, whereas the other people are only dabblers and so on, right? So he's showing you that even within the spiritual disciplines is so much of this ego game being played. All right, if you have to do it that way, that's the way you have to do it. All right, that's your way. Faddal, by all means, go sit in yeshiva for 10 years, go to the top of the mountain for 20 years, if you really must. Otherwise, you could just live life as is and just be mindful with what's in your life right now. And that really no judgment either way. But the point is, don't feel self-righteous, whatever you're doing. And that's the tough thing. Is because even me saying don't feel self-righteous, I could get in my head and say, maybe I'm feeling self-righteous about how I'm not being self-righteous. And it never ends. And you could keep spiraling within this until you put it down, until you just put down those thoughts, because those will never stop unless you just put them down. But the Taoist is the kind of person who shows you the shortcut and shows you how to do it by intelligence rather than effort, because that's what it is. This is one of my favorite ways of looking at it. It's intelligence. It's a skill. The same way you could perfect playing tennis is the same way that you could perfect being present with your thoughts and overcoming of the ego. It's the same type of skill. It just takes practice. Taoism is, in that sense, what everybody's looking for, the easy way and the shortcut, using cleverness instead of muscle. So the question naturally arises, isn't it cheating when in any game somebody really starts using his intelligence? He will very likely be accused of cheating. And to draw the line between skill and cheating is a very difficult thing to do. You see, the inferior intelligence will always accuse a superior intelligence of cheating. That's its way of saving face. You beat me by means that weren't fair. We were originally having a contest to find out who had the strongest muscles. And we were pushing against it like this. And this would prove who has the strongest muscles. But then you introduce some gimmick into it, some judo trick or something like that, you see, and you're not playing fair. So in the whole domain of ways of liberation, there are roots for the stupid people and roots for the intelligent people. And the latter are faster, right? And I don't even think he means this in a judgmental way when he says stupid. I think he literally just means there's ways for the quick-witted and ways for the dim-witted, like we said last week. These truths could take you 30 seconds or they could take you 30 years. I mean,
Wow.
and
So,
yeah,
Mike, I read something the other day. It was very interesting
yeah.
on the Rambam Guide to the Perplexed, and he said something that stuck with me. He said he called it will versus wisdom. So a lot of times, like you say, in this case, if someone has that kind of stamina or persistence or whatever, it could blow away the knowledge sometimes.
Yes. And the more you try, ironically, at a certain point, maybe you should be trying, when you're really young and you're first developing the skills, try away. That's great.
Yeah.
Keep trying. But at a certain point, you have to realize that more trying will get you nowhere. It's like hitting your head up against the wall over and over and over. But instead, there's another path towards what you're looking for. And that doesn't involve actual trying it, but involves more just being and noticing and breathing. But that's a great point. Okay, so let's see. This was perfectly clearly explained by Huineng, the sixth patriarch of Zen in China, in his sutra, where he says the difference between the gradual school is what we said. The difference between the gradual school and the sudden school is they both arrive at the same point, but the gradual is for slow-witted people and the sudden is for fast-witted people. Can you, in other words, find a way that sees into your own nature, that sees into the Tao immediately? And at the end of this morning's talk, I pointed out to you the immediate way, the way through now. When you know that this moment is the Tao and this moment is considered by itself without past and without future, eternal, neither coming into being or going out of being, there is nirvana. And there is a whole Chinese philosophy of time based on this. It hasn't, to my knowledge, been very much discussed by Taoist writers. It's been more discussed by Buddhist writers, but it's all based on the same thing. So once again, at the very core of this idea is the idea of time. That once you stop believing in the absolutism of time, once you stop continuing to connect moments, then you're starting to be able to kind of understand what's really going on here. Dogen, the great 13th century Japanese Zen Buddhist, studied in China, and he wrote a book called the Shobogenzo. Orochi said to me in Japan, that's a terrible book because it tells you everything. It gives the whole secret away. Brilliant, right? If you try to speak it out and you try to say it, it gives the secret away. And the whole trick of the thing is that the magician who's trying to do this magic shouldn't reveal his tricks in a way, right? Because when you are revealing your tricks, you kind of ruin the magic. So the point of a lot of these techniques is the same way as a joke. You don't want the joke explained to you before you hear the joke. You just want the joke to be told to you so that you get it naturally. And that's the beauty of the joke. The same way with the Zen koan and the same way with a lot of these teachings. But in the course of this book, he says there is no such thing as a progression in time. The spring does not become the summer. There is first spring, and then there is summer. So in the same way, you now do not become you later. This is T.S. Eliot's idea in the Four Quartets, where he says that the person who has settled down in the train to read the newspaper is not the same person who stepped onto the train from the platform. And therefore, also, you who sit here are not the same person who came in at the door. These states are separate, each in its own place. There was the coming in at the door person, but there's actually only the here and now sitting person. And the person sitting here and now is not the person who will die. Right? We've mentioned that before, that the moment you die is its own moment. Yeah.
So what do you take from this?
What do I take from this? I think what I take from this is what he means by overcoming karma, which is whatever you feel like is some kind of difficulty that you need to overcome in your life, or some kind of journey that you're on, or some kind of, I need to get this and then I'll be happy. In any given moment, that happiness is found right now. And that peace is found right now if you're only able to right now uncouple this moment. Like that first train in the whole group of freight trains, right? And to me, this is exactly that. It's a way of stopping to try to earn something, stopping to try to earn my own value, if you want to go into psychology. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Mike.
Yeah, I did.
So a big fan, my rest in peace, the Wayne Dyer was my guy for 30 years.
Of course.
And one of his key sayings was maybe relative to what you're saying. He said, "You'll see it when you believe it." That was yeah.
I love what he says. When you change the way you look at things, the things
that's his trademark. Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. And that's exactly what we were talking about with regards to beliefs. That if you change your beliefs, then right, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at actually change. So if I believe in free will, Harambam even says this, it does nothing actually changes in the world, but in a way, I actually do have more free will because my experience is of more free will. If I believe in a God, then in a way, I think we've discussed this. If I believe in God, then I see God more in my life. And if I don't, and I believe everything's meaningless, it'll be. And the point is, I think it's not necessarily more healthy or less healthy for people to either believe in God or not believe in God. We discussed the case of Kathy and the case of Theodore a few weeks ago, where there's certain types of people that their idea of God contributes to their pathology, versus other people, their degree of atheism actually contributes to their healing. But what I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, whatever it is, it's ineffable. You want to call it God, you want to call it the universe, you want to call it whatever you want to call it, that's fine with me. As long as we both acknowledge the ineffability of it, the paradox of it, and the balanced way of living that could hopefully lead us to experiencing it.
So,
yes.
Comment mentioned about the person who came through the door, not the person who sat down.
Exactly.
What I took from that was completely completely different. Is that the idea that you're always growing, no matter where you started, no matter where you finish, you're never the same person. You never. You were yesterday, you're not today.
So I both totally agree and totally disagree at the same time. Why do I say that? I was just having this conversation with somebody in psychology recently, and that is that on the one hand, growth is vital and beautiful and a huge part of life and the human condition and a huge part of the entire goal of the whole universe. And Kabbalah is very big on that. And everything is headed in a certain direction. And Judaism was the first one to stop seeing time as cyclical, but to see time as linear. We're the inventors of history. And we saw that time is headed in a certain way because progress exists 100%. I agree. And yet I totally disagree. Why? Because there's nowhere to go and nothing to be and nothing more to get. And everything is already here.
I don't understand that.
So what I mean by that is whatever is here right now is already perfect. And this is all that there actually is. And there's nothing more to do
Okay, so,
on the one hand.
okay, no, so I agree with that, but. Do you
But also
do
growth.
Do you see everything as perfect now?
I think from a certain perspective,
Do you see everything as perfect?
yeah, I
So,
can
okay.
see it all being part of a perfect.
Existence,
No,
itself.
no, I understand. My point is that when I say growth, I don't necessarily mean growth. I mean, our perception of the world
Hmm.
is growing. So
Okay.
While I see only like 50% of the world is perfect, let's say,
Hmm.
tomorrow it'll be a little more. Nothing changed, everything's perfect.
Hmm.
But I can't perceive everything to be perfect.
But
So
maybe one day you
after-
change your
after
perspective
50
to make it
years,
seem
after
more
50,
perfect.
60 years, whatever it is, my perceptions changed.
I love that. I think that's
So
exactly it.
everything's perfect, but we're
Yeah,
growing. Not like
Exactly. It's
growing,
not that you're changing the world, it's that you're
Nothing's
changing
changing.
yourself.
Yes.
And
that's
through
what I
changing
mean.
yourself, you achieve more levels of
That's what I mean by growth.
beautiful. Nope, I have no problem with that. I think
No
that's a
problem
great
with that.
point. And that's the whole paradox of it, is that it's found now. In 60 years, you would have figured out, yeah, it's all right now. That's the irony of all of it. Because we are all in a constant flux, he says. And the continuity of the person from past through present to future is as illusory in its own way as the upward movement of the red lines on a revolving barber pole. You know, it goes round and round and round, and the whole thing seems to be going up or going down, whichever the case may be. But actually, nothing is going up or down. So when you throw a pebble into the pond and you make concentric rings of waves, there's an illusion that the water is flowing outwards. And no water is flowing outwards at all. Water is only going up and down. What appears to move outward is the wave, not the water. Right? So there's an illusion that we have of movement in any given moment. Even movement itself, me moving my head in any given moment, in any way you want to cut time, there's only where my hand is in that moment. But the funny thing about quantum physics is we're discovering that the more you try to define the position, the less you understand about the velocity or momentum, and vice versa. The more you try to understand the momentum, the less you understand the position. So you can never quite pinpoint it. It has to be something that's experiential right now. A couple more words and then we'll get to the Kabbalistic stuff. So this kind of philosophical argument says that our seeming to go along in a course of time doesn't really happen. Right now
So
is really the truth of it. And the course of time you think you're on
no,
is
so-
not really
so
true.
people that die of old age, what does he make of that? The time.
Who's the one who's dying?
As you're saying, there's say,
There is no such thing. The moment of death.
another thing is a person.
I don't know.
Is that what he's saying?
You can only talk about a person with regards to his entire environment in space and in time. So you can talk about a person from the Big Bang till now, and only if you give all that context, and the person in addition to the entire universe. Because there is no separate person. But we'll talk more. It's a longer conversation. Yeah,
Little.
it's okay. We'll talk more about
I
it.
understand what he's saying. He's saying that there's no such thing as any continue. There's nothing continue. I don't know.
Continual. Either way,
It's a middle. It's not it's something like that. But there's nothing like that because everything is
this
now and
moment.
then- now and then.
Exactly.
I get that, but what does he say about things that, like a flower that dies?
Yeah, that's
The fact that it grew up means what?
it's part of believing in time. It's part of connecting separate events. But really, every moment is a separate event. So, like he said, the summer doesn't become the fall.
It's just
First there is
fall.
summer, then there is fall. First there is flower alive, then there is flower dead. It's not that the alive flower became the dead flower
So the
in
alive-
real reality.
So this flower became the flower that's a little bigger.
No, it's first there was small flower, then there was big flower, then there was dead flower.
So it didn't become anything. It just
Mm.
was gone.
And if you, in this way of speaking,
So okay, so you're saying my phone, but this phone is not the same phone. Saying it's a different phone.
mhm.
I'm asking, is that what you're saying? That this
Yeah,
phone is
That's exactly what he's saying.
it's a different phone?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's saying that everything is created again every moment.
אלוהים מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית.
That implies every day, not
Every day.
moment.
Well,
It's so different.
maybe yom means moment, but we'll talk more about it. I think
I don't
let's
know,
move on
Yom
for now, but
seems
we'll.
to mean 1,000 years.
Yeah.
To many other.
That's true too.
So,
Time is an illusion
Time is
anyway.
the-
Yeah,
that's the whole
exactly.
illusion. Yom,
Yeah.
What does Yom mean?
Yeah. So listen, what do the Buddhists say? Suffering exists, but no one who suffers. Deeds exist, but no doers are found. A path there is, but no one who follows it. And nirvana is, but no one who attains it. So the key to most of your questions really is, who's asking? Because when you talk about the phone or the flower, it's always with regards to you who's experiencing it. So to really get to the root of your answer, you need to understand who am I that's asking the question.
okay. But at the end of the day, whether I'm here or there's nobody here, it's an empty world and no one's like, there's no person or anything existing. You would say the flower does grow?
Oh, I won't even know that there is a flower unless there's a person to perceive it.
So is he saying that if there was no one to perceive the flower, then it isn't there or it is there?
Both.
When
It's a paradox.
Okay,
yeah.
so on the side that it exists.
The world exists in my head, and my head exists in the world. And I can't state one or the other without stating the other one.
It's through your perception, reality emerges. But through reality, your perception
Yeah.
emerges. And so they're dependent on each other.
We'll talk a little more after classes. I want to move on, but it's a great questions. So in this way, they look upon the continuity of life as the same sort of illusion that is produced when you take a cigarette and in the dark whirl it, and the illusion of a circle is created, whereas there is only the one point of fire, right, in any given moment. So let's go to some Kabbalistic stuff, and we'll definitely have time for questions at the end and comments, 100%. So last time we were talking about the tension that exists. And I think it was Elazar of Worms was talking about this idea that he can not really love God through spending time with his family and through doing physical acts of pleasure, but rather he can love God only in the generalities. And we're talking about loving the particular and loving the general. That really, unfortunately, what this person seemed to fail to understand, the reason that certain rabbis wouldn't even chew their food out of acts of asceticism is because they didn't understand, maybe, that you can love God in the general sense through loving every one of the particulars of his world, right? And that's the paradox. Loving the general through loving the particular. So I gave this derasha in Parashat Yitro when the Torah is being given, and the beginning of the Torah of the parasha talks all about Moshe's personal life and Yitro, his father-in-law, and all these very personal things with regards to Moshe. And then it talks about these grand national things, and it's like, what's the reason for this contrast? And the reason, I think, is because through loving the particulars and through noticing where a lot of those generalities eventually come from, you have to realize, look, they came from the particulars. And you can't love the general without loving the particular.
So
I don't know.
why can't you say that only once you attain a certain level can you love the general without the particular? But first you have to go through loving the particular.
Fair enough. You let me know if you get to. Well, but
I'm saying you love
yeah.
the particulars, it gets to the level where you can appreciate the general.
Mhm,
But once you're there and you appreciate the general, do you really need the particulars anymore?
mhm. Could be not.
That's the
Could be
question.
not. You're right. I don't know. Maybe Elazar of Worms. Yeah, maybe he was on a different level. You're right. Could be.
In the beginning, and he realized he loved God through all these small things, and he's like, I don't need all this.
Yeah, no, I'm not judging. I'm saying up to each person on their own journey, 100%. So we also talked last time about the Hatat Nazir, that the Nazir had to bring a Korban Hatat at the end of his career as a Nazir, and this monk, and who refrained from drinking wine and from, cutting his hair. And I think some may say that, of course, Tamemet, he wouldn't have, come in contact with the dead. And the reason that some of the schools say that he brings this sin offering is because he is now ceasing from being on that high level of spirituality. But on the other hand, the other school says no, he sinned by refraining from enjoying of this God's world, and by refraining from enjoying of the particulars of life. So that debate that we were just having exists within the idea of Nazir as well. The majority of Talmudic and later rabbis, of course, wow, Baruch haba, the majority of Talmudic and later rabbis rejected asceticism and believed in celebrating physical existence as an opportunity to offer thanks to God. And that's an attitude of thankful acceptance. So today's Judaism, we know about the idea of enjoying food and drink, family and friends, especially during Shabbat and holidays. As it says in the Torah, "V'samachta b'chol hatob asher natan lecha Adonai Elohecha, ata v'halevi v'hager b'sharecha." Love all the goodness and be happy with it and celebrate with all the people around you. Don't close yourself off. Simcha in the Torah is something that is the joy we share with others. There is also time for joy by ourselves at Bodhidut and stuff like that, but the real ultimate joy happens as part of a group. Exactly. Gratitude is shown to God by being mindful of the physical pleasures that we experience, respecting how our food died for us to live, died in order for us to live, right? And cooking it well. So this is something people often talk to me about with regards to vegetarianism. And we have so many people who are so self-righteous about how vegan they are. And part of me is very admiring. That's great. Be vegan. Don't kill sentient animals. But at the end of the day, we're drawing these arbitrary distinctions between what we will kill and what we won't kill. Who's to say that a plant doesn't have some degree of feeling? Just because it's not the same as the feeling that you and I feel doesn't mean that it's not feeling anything at all. So the bottom line is, you as a human being cannot live unless you are eating something that once lived and killing that thing in order to live. So get off your high horse. If you want to be vegan and that brings you better, closer to enlightenment, good for you. That's great. Kudos. Don't put everybody else down for not being vegan. And I think that's the point, is it's not supposed to be an opportunity for self-righteousness. It's just supposed to be something that makes you live a more meaningful and present life. So the ascetic practices could easily become also ends in and of themselves, by the way, that if you become so obsessed with these practices, they're going to overtake you. They're going to kind of take on a life of their own. And they're not going to be really a means of serving God. They're going to be very self-serving. And this is the trap of pride that was inherent in asceticism. It's the same reason we mentioned last week. Harambam, Maimonides, talks about the idea of the golden mean, following the middle path that Aristotle first talked about. The reason that the Buddha developed his type of meditation style and his entire philosophy is very much the same thing, that he saw that asceticism doesn't work, and he saw that indulging in all of this pleasure doesn't work. So he also developed the middle path. And this is something that is converging through many different traditions, is the idea of being balanced in whatever we're doing. And some of us, because we were unbalanced at a certain point, we need to go to the other extreme. So if you were, sleeping with hookers every night and getting drunk all day for 10 years, maybe you need to spend 10 years in yeshiva. I'm not taking that away from you. That's totally fine with me. I'm not doctor, tell you what to do. I'm doctor, I'm here with you in whatever part of your process you're currently in. But at the end of the day,
is there any way you should do that? Which is first?
I would recommend doing the in the order that I said. Otherwise, you're headed in the wrong direction. Unless I'm not judging. Whatever floats your boat.
But Mikey, I thought that middle of the road is history.
Middle of the road is history?
Yeah.
Why?
And today, in the community today, it's left or right. Is there any middle of the road anymore? By the way, I call it Jiddor.
Yes.
Jiddor was the real deal.
100%.
Everybody today, God bless everybody, has a direction: left, right, center, up, down, in, out. But Jiddor was the real deal. But Jiddor was really, if you want to say, not middle, but more balance. I like balance better than middle.
Yes.
Because middle means that you're really not going left or right. But balance means that you're touching all the bases to me.
I couldn't agree more. And I think a big part of the extremism that we're seeing religiously in the community today, politically in the world today, is very
Right.
much out of fear and divisiveness. And
Right. That's a great point.
yeah, when people are trying to set up walls around themselves, it's almost always out of fear. And you know, it's okay to be afraid, but it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to say, despite the fear, I'm not going to allow myself to go too far to either extreme. I'm going to try to really stay in line with being moderate, despite the pressure to pull in one direction or the other.
Right.
There's always going to be that tension. And everybody finds that balance for themselves, like you're saying. It's 100% right. So there's always a trap of pride with asceticism. And even further than that, you have the bitterness to others that sometimes comes about others who don't suffer as much as you do, because you're becoming morbid, depressed, physically ill, abusive of others. And of course, none of that is conducive to the spiritual quest. And that's kind of a natural consequence. When you deprive yourself of your human needs, part of that process is going to result in a lot of these difficult emotions. So we know that in AA, it's amazing, Alcoholics Anonymous, people who used to have their life in absolute smithereens, everything was chaos. And then they're discovering this higher power. They're discovering the healing process. They're quitting from alcohol. And they talk about a trap not to fall into in the big book of AA. And they say, don't now look at the world and say, I figured it out and I'm going to tell all you fools what I just learned. And then I'm going to tell all you what you're doing wrong, because it's so common among Ba'alet Teshuvah, among people who are returning to a more stable lifestyle, that they now think that they could go around telling everybody how to be, because they themselves didn't know how to be balanced until now. And they're assuming that they have God's gift to the world. But really, that's nothing more than just hopeful ignorance and a lot of ego. And that's okay. It's part of the healing process to feel so excited about what you got, but don't impose that on other people. We love to quote this pasuk from Tehillim, that Hashem is ote or kasama. Hashem stretches out the light like it's a garment. So it's this idea of seeing the physical world as a veil covering all of the divine light, sparks hidden within the kilipot, within the shells. And there's this idea within Kabbalah that human sin strengthens the kilipot. And again, this is all with regards to the first view we were talking about before, which is that the world is headed in a certain positive direction of progress. So within that framework of thinking, there exists sin and mitzvah and good deed. And when you do something that's bringing the world further away from that end goal, that's strengthening the kilipot, the husks. And human redemptive deeds serve to weaken the husks and facilitate elevation of and liberation of the sparks to reunite with the source, which is God. And that's Rabbi Sacks's inspiration for the idea called to heal a fractured world, that the world today is very much fractured, and that humans are all part of this collective psychosis. And this collective psychosis that humans are part of is buying into an egoistic framework, a way of thinking about ourselves as fundamentally separate from the world. And in a way, the world is sick and we are sick and we all need healing. And that's why Kabbalah is such a beautiful way of thinking about this healing process. Even basic acts like eating and drinking, the Kabbalists saw as liberating divine sparks. And you're elevating the physical to the spiritual. We all know the difference, right, between physicality that's devoid of spirituality and physicality that's imbued with spirituality. So we know the difference between eating a very quick meal, and not really being mindful, versus eating around a Friday night dinner table where it just feels different with your family around and everyone's speaking divrei Torah and words of wisdom. And there's a certain way of tapping into that physicality being uplifted to the spiritual. And it's all a frame of mind. It's all a mindset to have. Hasidut taught very beautifully that certain sparks could only be liberated by particular individuals, as they and they alone possess a special relationship with the soul of another individual who might be somehow involved with those sparks. So if practiced humbly, this notion can fully express love of the particular, right? If you do this humbly, if you don't get too high on your high horse, like, look at me, how many sparks I'm liberating, and I liberated more sparks than you. If you put all that down, you say, God is weaving together this epic story of, I had to be the one to liberate these particular sparks, and you had to be the one to liberate those particular sparks. At the end of the day, we're all one, but in the particulars that we are, we can express love to each other and to the sparks that God left hidden within this world. And all this comes down to mean that you're a unique individual on a unique mission that only you can fulfill. And that adds a really an aura of really beauty and really deep feeling to whatever we're doing.
So, one point
Sure.
On the elevating the physical to the spiritual, I was told, I think my father, he told me, I don't know from where this is, but
Mhm.
if I wanted to elevate my sushi tonight, all I had to do was to think about, I'm eating this so that I can come, I can learn.
Mm.
This way, I'm eating it so I can learn. Therefore, this is now mitzvah to eat this. You can do that before you go to sleep. I'm doing it so I can get up for shachar. For everything you do in the day. I'm using my phone. I can go to work, so I can make money, so I can get to that time.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, you could just say that about everything.
100%.
Then your whole day is a mitzvah.
I
It's
think
not
that's-
like you're doing this. Your whole day is.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely beautiful, and I want to balance that. I think that you should keep doing that and don't stop doing that.
I try.
Yeah, and whenever you
I'm
can.
not like,
But at the same time, don't let it get too far,
no, you can't.
because if you take it too far, you're thinking too much about the thing instead of just being with the thing. And you have to be able to balance the intentionality with the mindfulness, like we were talking about at the very beginning of the class. But I agree 100%. Those are great intentions to set. It's almost like right before I eat the sushi, I set an intention with a beracha, with whatever thoughts I have, and then I enjoy the sushi, and I am mindful of it.
When you
Right?
say releasing the kilipot, you're talking about making tikkunim, or you're saying doing the average mitzvah?
I think both. I think even just doing the average mitzvah, or even eating, removes, they say, the sparks from the kilipot. Right? And so we'll see a little bit more about that in a second. Just an amazing story I heard. There was like a man that was sent by his rabbi, I think maybe even the Baal Shem Tov in the hundreds of years ago, to go all the way across Europe to go do some kind of business deal, or really to deliver a letter of some sort. And the man goes and he delivers the letter, and he comes back to his Rebbe months later. And he says, Rabbi, what was in the letter? He says, oh, it was just, a couple of words of Chizuk. He's like, and he didn't really understand what. He's like, oh, by the way, did you encounter a stream along the way? He says, yeah. He's like, what did you do? He's like, I drank some water from the stream, and I said, Shakol Niyabed Baro. I made the blessing. He says, it was really for that reason that I sent you all the way across Europe, was just to liberate those particular sparks in that amount of water that you drank. And you could take this with a grain of salt if you want, but the point is, it adds a level of real beauty that should, and if anything, force more mindfulness onto you. That everything you're doing, be fully mindful of it. Don't be neurotic about it and worry, but give it an air of holiness, of whatever I'm doing is in a way sacred and it's sacrosanct. Everyone I'm serving is like in a way serving God. Yeah.
You're not saying that everything you do liberates sparks, but something could be, so you have to be mindful of everything.
Sure. And I think in a way, everything you do is liberating sparks. It's all about the belief system that you hold.
Everything.
It's not an absolute.
you don't
It's not
have-
absolute. I don't. It's not something to know.
That's what you know.
It's not an absolute yes or no. I think it's a meditative technique. It's a style of thinking about the world. But I'm glad you asked. Yeah, great. A couple more minutes. So when you find yourself in a distant place, also they say, it's divinely ordained. It's an opportunity to redeem those particular sparks, like we said. So if you find yourself going on some kind of vacation or whatever, in a unique place. I was recently in Sfat, and I had this beautiful meditation just by myself, and I really felt, in a way, like this is meant to be for me to be right here, right now, in this moment. And we're not always so lucky to have the grace to be so present in any given moment, but that grace comes about when it needs to come about.
Is that not an implication that there's sparks where you normally are, that you have to liberate?
I think that's exactly what it means. But whatever you want, whatever you have the capacity to deal with in that moment.
I'm just asking
Yeah.
if you agree with that implication, that's all.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if it has to imply that or not, but the point is, I think you have the capability of imbuing it with that. I want to shy away a little bit from like the absolutism of
No.
the sparks are always there, sparks are not always there. I think if you try to claim it and say it, it's going to stop being true. That's what I will say.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Well, we got to have a longer conversation now. We have a lot to talk about. Eating, we said, was seen as a way of liberating those sparks. And therefore, they discouraged unnecessary fasting. And they manifested the divine sparks trapped within the husks through an act of eating and through a mindful act of doing what you're doing. And even the defecation process, even going to the bathroom, was seen as separating out the husks from the sparks in a certain way and enlisting the bodily needs and pleasures alike in the service of God, right? And like what they say in here, they say, "Sheyu kol ma'asecha l'shem shamayim." That's like one of these sayings. All your actions should be for the sake of heaven. So I wrote here in my own note, careful not to be too neurotic, lest you become resentful of this practice. So I think that was part of my resistance, forgive me, to what you were saying, is because I find that if you give absolutism to a lot of this stuff, it becomes taken way too far. And recitation of mantras and people blessing honey and selling it for inordinate amounts and taking down lists and lists and lists of names to say like a magic formula under a chuppah, under a wedding canopy. And I'm so afraid, I think, of allowing these beautiful meditative practices to be co-opted and perverted in that way. But I think in their pure form, when taken with a meditative head and without, is it this or is it that? You know, are there sparks? I know sparks.
So it's like
It makes it more beautiful. Yeah.
Thinking of a name and you're not like calm.
Yes.
Like, and then you're so close. You're like, okay, please help this person. It works, but if you have a list of names, like, oh, I'm here. Okay.
Yeah. This one, Ben, you're reading a whole list of things. Are you really doing anything?
It's a lot different than when you're like in the moment thinking or praying for whatever reason.
I agree. I think it's much more valuable to actually be deeply emotionally connected with the actions that you're doing most of the time. And it's a beautiful way of experiencing the world. Like we say, it's not scientific or explanatory of the world. Rather, it's meditative. And listen to the words of the Baal Shem Tov. He says, it is an important principle that whatever a person eats or wears or any vessel he uses, he benefits from the force present in that object. Without this spiritual life force, it would be devoid of existence. Further, in each of these things, there are holy sparks related to the root of his soul. This is the reason why a person likes a certain thing while another does not. Hence, when a person uses that thing or eats that food, even if he does it to satisfy a physical need, he can thereby repair the fallen sparks. For the strength he acquires from that garment or meal, or whatever he uses to serve God, thereby repairs them. So again, he's emphasizing this unique relationship between the person engaged in this physical act or with this physical object and that physical act or object. And he is stating it in an absolute way. And I think many have and many will continue to state it in an absolute way. But for me personally, I have found that it's not for me to state. Exactly.
So I mentioned something interesting.
Yeah.
The Mensch says you should put on your clothing like one thing at a time.
Hmm.
Don't put an undershirt and shirt at the same time. Reason being that your object, like your clothing, like each item has like a sphere of some sort of Kabbalistic light or something on it, that when you put it on, it like surrounds you and then it's on. But if you put two on at the same time, there's nothing surrounding that first piece of clothing.
Hmm.
For whatever reason, it's better just put one on, let the thing, and then the other one.
Beautiful.
I don't really
No,
explain that.
I think it's great. I think it's great exactly as a meditative technique. Or if you think there is an absolutism to that, no problem. I'll tell you what my fear is. My fear is that it could feed into the same pathology as anything else in your life, which is, what if I didn't do it that way? What if I put on the thing in the wrong way or not mindfully or da, 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 da? Then it's, God forbid, I strengthened the husks and I added to the evil inclination of the world. And so you start getting neurotic and you start getting down on yourself and you start judging yourself.
Whether or not you believe it to be an absolute, there has to be a fact of the matter is either it is there.
Oh, does there have to be?
Or it isn't there.
Does there have to be an absolutism to it? Even that's a belief.
Well, fine. I believe that whether I know it or not, that there is
Ah,
something.
so this is the famous thing. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. You are saying absolutely, yes, it makes a sound. And what I'm trying to say is
If you think about
maybe
too
it
much,
doesn't make a sound. And at the same time, I'm trying to say I think it's both. So I'm saying be careful of going too far in one direction, because then you might not be so
I
balanced.
hear
For
you.
me, this is for me personally. I can only speak for me. For you, it might be that being more balanced involves believing in it more
say
absolutely.
Everything's absolute, right? Say everything's absolute.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean you have to follow every single thing that the Kabbalah states. You do what you can,
Mhm.
and that's it. If I put two shirts on at the same time every day, okay, so this thing I mixed up, I messed up. Just because I believe everything to be absolute doesn't mean that I believe also that I have to follow every single thing in Kabbalah.
I hear you. And the other interesting thing we said about beliefs earlier was that the more you believe in something, the more it actually is true for you in your experience. So if that's the world that you're choosing to live in, by all means, it's going to be intense and pretty epic because it's absolute reality. But what I've found for myself is I don't need that degree of intensity, of epicness. I would like it, but it comes with a degree of intensity that's way too much for me. And I can't quite allow myself to live so far in that direction. And I need to live also in the direction of it's all a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, as Shakespeare would say. And it's nothing special. It just is. And when I'm able to balance these two things, and I think that's the reason I bring in both the Eastern stuff and the Kabbalistic stuff in every class, is because I've found that if I only do the Kabbalistic stuff, I'm very unbalanced. And that might not be the case for you. And that's up to you to find. We all find our own balance. And God bless everybody for that balance that they're striking and that they're finding. I think we could pause here. Any questions or comments beyond that? And forgive me, I know I was very strong.
I have,
Please, we have so much to talk about, really. Yeah. But anyone else? Yeah. Or yeah.
no, more about this Kabbalist thing. Would you say that there's different levels?
I think it's
So would you say, if you believe that there's more than one level, if you believe that, would you say that you can only subscribe to the lower level?
I'll tell you where I think the paradox is. So a lot of people talk about this where they say when somebody has a mystical experience, they experience that oneness experience to be the highest and the only level. And that's 100% true. And it's also not true at the same time, because then there is also this level. And this level is just as perfect as that one. And it's ineffable. It's you could kind of stand on your head and spit with nickels, as they say, because nobody could ever really state the truth of, are there levels or are they all equal? Yeah. All right. Guys, Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen. To be continued next week. ID, thank you so much as always. Oh, let's do it.
Great. It was dynamite. Thanks, Mike.
Welcome,
Have a
Baruch.
great week.
Love you, ID. We'll talk more.
I'll see you definitely for sure. I'll see you later.
I love you. Allah ma'ak.
Bye.